In the small, quiet town of Maplewood, life moved at its own unhurried pace. The streets were lined with tall oak trees whose branches stretched toward the sky like welcoming arms. Everyone knew each other by name, and conversations often began with warm smiles or friendly waves. At the heart of this close-knit community stood Maggie's Diner, a humble eatery that had been around for decades. Its faded red sign creaked slightly in the wind, but it still proudly displayed the words, "Home-cooked meals," in bold white letters. Inside, the diner was cozy. Booths with cracked vinyl seats, checkered tablecloths, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the aroma of pancakes and bacon. The woman behind the counter was Maggie Thompson, a middle-aged woman with curly brown hair streaked with gray and eyes that always seemed to carry a hint of sadness. Despite her struggles, she greeted every customer with a warm smile and a kind word. Her pies were legendary, and people came from miles away just to taste them. But what no one realized was that beneath her cheerful exterior lay years of hardship that had pushed her to the edge of despair. 5 years ago, Maggie's world had crumbled when her husband Jack passed away unexpectedly. He had been her rock, her partner in running the diner, and the father of their 2 children, Emily and Jake. His sudden death left Maggie reeling, not only emotionally but financially. Jack had taken out loans to keep the diner afloat during tough times, and now those debts fell squarely on Maggie's shoulders. She worked tirelessly, juggling late-night shifts and early mornings, trying to provide for her kids while keeping the diner open. But no matter how hard she tried, the bills kept piling up, and the weight of her responsibilities grew heavier with each passing day. By the winter of 2022, Maggie found herself staring down the barrel of an eviction notice. The bank had sent letters reminding her of overdue payments, and she knew it was only a matter of time before they took action. That cold December morning, as snowflakes drifted lazily from the gray sky, Maggie unlocked the diner's door and saw the dreaded paper taped to the glass. Her hands trembled as she read the official-looking document. Final notice of eviction. Tears welled up in her eyes as she sank onto one of the vinyl stools behind the counter. How could she tell her children that they might lose their home? How could she explain that all her efforts hadn't been enough? For the first time in years, Maggie felt utterly defeated. She buried her face in her hands, letting the tears fall freely. The diner, which had once been a source of pride and joy, now felt like a prison, a constant reminder of everything she couldn't fix. But even in her darkest moments, Maggie refused to give up. Somewhere deep inside, a spark of determination flickered to life. She thought about her children, Emily, who dreamed of becoming a teacher, and Jake, who loved tinkering with cars. They deserved better than this. And so, despite the crushing weight of her circumstances, Maggie decided to keep going, if only for them. She wiped her tears, straightened her apron, and got to work preparing for the day ahead. As the hours passed, the diner slowly filled with customers, regulars who stopped by for breakfast before heading to work, retirees sipping coffee and chatting about the weather, and families grabbing a quick meal before school drop-offs. Maggie moved through the space with practiced ease, refilling mugs, taking orders, and delivering plates of steaming food. Her smile never faltered, even though her heart felt heavy. To everyone else, she appeared to be the same cheerful woman they'd always known. Only Sarah, a local journalist who frequented the diner, noticed the weariness in Maggie's eyes. Sarah had been coming to Maggie's diner for years, drawn not just by the delicious food but also by the warmth of the atmosphere. Over time, she'd grown fond of Maggie and admired her resilience. That morning, as she sat at her usual booth nursing a cup of coffee, Sarah watched Maggie closely. Something seemed different about her today. Not just tired, but burdened in a way that made Sarah's heart ache. After finishing her meal, Sarah approached the counter and struck up a casual conversation. "How are you holding up, Maggie?" Sarah asked gently, leaning against the counter. Maggie forced a smile. "Oh, you know me. I'm fine," she replied. Though her voice lacked its usual cheerfulness, Sarah hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "You've done so much for this town, Maggie. If there's anything I can do to help, please don't hesitate to ask." For a brief second, Maggie's facade slipped, and Sarah caught a glimpse of the pain behind her smile. But then Maggie shook her head and said, "Thank you, Sarah. Really, I appreciate it. But we'll get through this somehow." That exchange stayed with Sarah long after she left the diner. As a journalist, she was always on the lookout for stories that mattered, stories that could inspire or bring attention to important issues. And as she drove home that evening, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Maggie's story needed to be told. It wasn't just about a struggling diner owner. It was about someone who had faced unimaginable challenges, yet continued to serve others with unwavering kindness. Over the next few days, Sarah returned to the diner multiple times, engaging Maggie in light conversations and gradually earning her trust. One afternoon, as the lunch rush died down and the diner grew quieter, Sarah broached the subject directly. "Maggie," she began, "I want to write a story about you, about your journey, your struggles, and how you've managed to keep this place running despite everything. People need to hear it." Maggie's eyes widened in surprise. "A story about me? Why would anyone care about my life?" "Because you're inspiring, Maggie," Sarah said earnestly. "Not many people would keep going the way you have, especially when things seem impossible. Your strength could give hope to others who are struggling." Maggie hesitated, torn between her desire for privacy and the possibility of reaching someone who might benefit from her story. Finally, she nodded. "All right, Sarah, you can write about me, but promise me one thing." "What's that?" Sarah asked. "Make sure the focus isn't just on my problems," Maggie said firmly. "I want people to see the good in our community, too. There's still so much worth fighting for." With Maggie's blessing, Sarah set to work crafting the article. She spent hours interviewing Maggie, learning about her past, her dreams, and the sacrifices she'd made to keep her family together. She also spoke to regular patrons of the diner, capturing their admiration for Maggie and the role the diner played in their lives. When the piece was finally published in the regional newspaper, it carried the title, "From Rock Bottom to Miracles: How One Woman's Kindness is Changing a Town." The response was overwhelming. Letters poured in from readers expressing their gratitude and admiration for Maggie. Donations arrived from strangers eager to help, ranging from small checks to generous contributions. Local businesses offered free supplies, and volunteers showed up at the diner offering their time and skills. Even the bank called, moved by the public outcry of support, and agreed to renegotiate Maggie's loan terms. For the first time in years, Maggie allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. Her simple act of perseverance, combined with Sarah's storytelling, had sparked something extraordinary. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would transform not just her life, but the entire town of Maplewood. The weeks following the publication of Sarah's article brought an unexpected wave of change to Maggie's life and her diner. Donations arrived daily, some in envelopes slipped under the diner's door, others delivered by hand from neighbors who wanted to help. Local businesses donated food supplies while volunteers showed up offering their time to clean, cook, or serve meals. For the first time in years, Maggie felt a weight lifting off her shoulders. Yet amidst all the generosity, she remained grounded, focusing on what truly mattered, helping those in need. One particularly bitter January morning, as frost clung to the windows of the diner, a man walked in. He was tall but gaunt, his clothes threadbare and patched together. His face bore the marks of hardship, deep lines etched into his skin, eyes sunken with fatigue. He hesitated at the entrance, glancing around nervously before stepping inside. The warmth of the diner seemed to envelop him, but his posture remained tense, as though he feared being turned away. Maggie noticed him immediately. She had seen countless faces over the years, each carrying its own story of struggle. Something about this man, however, struck a chord within her. Perhaps it was the way he lingered near the counter, clearly embarrassed but desperate. Or maybe it was the faint resemblance he bore to her late husband Jack, a kindness in his eyes that reminded her of better days. Whatever it was, Maggie approached him with her usual warmth. "Good morning," she said softly, giving him a reassuring smile. "What can I get for you?" The man looked down at his worn boots, avoiding her gaze. I don't have much, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. But I was wondering if I could maybe work for a meal. Just something small. I'm starving. Maggie's heart ached at his words. She studied him for a moment, noting the hollow look in his eyes and the way his hands trembled slightly. Without hesitation, she reached behind the counter and grabbed a plate already piled high with scrambled eggs, toast, and bacon. Sliding it across the counter, she said firmly, "No need to work for it. Eat first. We'll figure out the rest later." The man's eyes widened in surprise, disbelief flickering across his face. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice cracking with emotion. "I don't want to take advantage." "You're not taking advantage," Maggie interrupted, gently. "Everyone needs a little help sometimes. Now sit down and eat. You look like you haven't had a proper meal in days." Gratitude flooded the man's expression as he took the plate and settled into one of the booths. As he ate, Maggie busied herself with other tasks, occasionally glancing over to ensure he was comfortable. By the time he finished, the tension in his shoulders had eased and a hint of color returned to his cheeks. When he approached the counter to thank her, Maggie handed him a cup of coffee. "Take your time," she said kindly. "If there's anything else you need, let me know." The man introduced himself as Daniel, explaining that he'd recently lost his job and been evicted from his apartment. With no family nearby and nowhere else to turn, he'd been wandering from town to town, surviving on scraps and odd jobs. "I didn't think anyone would care," he confessed, his voice thick with emotion. "But you didn't even hesitate. Thank you." Maggie nodded, her own eyes misty. "We've all been where you are at some point," she replied. "It's important to remember that we're stronger together." Word of Maggie's kindness spread quickly through Maplewood. That evening, several locals stopped by the diner, curious about the stranger who had received such compassion. Some were moved to tears when they heard Daniel's story. Others vowed to contribute whatever they could to help. One elderly woman named Mrs. Henderson, a regular at the diner, insisted on paying for Daniel's next meal. "If Maggie can give so freely, then so can I," she declared, setting a crisp $20 bill on the counter. Daniel stayed in Mapletown for a few more days, during which Maggie connected him with local resources, a shelter where he could stay temporarily, a community center offering job training programs, and even a part-time position at a nearby grocery store. Before leaving, he hugged Maggie tightly, tears streaming down his face. "You saved me," he whispered. "I'll never forget what you've done." While Daniel's departure marked the end of one chapter, it signaled the beginning of another. Inspired by Maggie's actions, people began approaching her with offers of assistance, not just for her, but for others in similar situations. One afternoon, a young couple named Lisa and Tom came into the diner with their 2 children. They explained that they had recently moved to Maplewood after losing everything in a house fire. Though they were working hard to rebuild their lives, feeding their family remained a constant challenge. Without missing a beat, Maggie invited them to sit down and serve them a hearty meal. Over the next hour, she listened intently as Lisa and Tom shared their struggles, nodding sympathetically and offering words of encouragement. By the time they left, Lisa hugged Maggie tightly, promising to return once they were back on their feet. True to her word, she did, bringing homemade cookies as a token of gratitude and volunteering to help out at the diner whenever possible. As these acts of kindness multiplied, Maggie realized something profound. Helping others wasn't just about easing their burdens. It was also about healing her own wounds. Every smile, every heartfelt thank you, reminded her why she had fought so hard to keep the diner open. It became clear that her mission extended far beyond serving food. She was building connections, fostering hope, and creating a sense of belonging in a world that often felt cold and indifferent. Meanwhile, Sarah continued documenting Maggie's journey, capturing moments of transformation both big and small. She wrote follow-up articles highlighting specific individuals whose lives had been touched by Maggie's generosity. These stories resonated deeply with readers, sparking conversations about the power of community and the importance of looking out for one another. Letters poured in from across the region, many accompanied by donations earmarked for Maggie's efforts. One letter stood out among the rest. Written by a woman named Clara, it described how reading about Maggie had inspired her to start a free weekly meal program in her own neighborhood. "Your courage gave me the push I needed to make a difference," Clara wrote. "Thank you for showing us that even in our darkest moments, we can be a light for others." Encouraged by such responses, Maggie decided to take things a step further. With the influx of donations, she began hosting weekly community nights at the diner. On these evenings, anyone in need could come and enjoy a warm meal without having to worry about cost. Volunteers from the town pitched in, cooking, serving, and cleaning up afterward. The events quickly became a staple of Maplewood life, drawing crowds that spilled out onto the sidewalk. Each community night was a testament to the strength of human connection. Strangers introduced themselves over plates of spaghetti and laughter-filled conversations. Children played games in the corner while parents swapped stories and advice. Even those who weren't facing hardships attended, eager to support the cause and strengthen the bonds within the community. For Maggie, watching these gatherings unfold filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Her diner, once a symbol of personal struggle, had transformed into a beacon of hope, a place where people came together not just to eat but to heal, grow, and thrive. But as the weeks turned into months, Maggie couldn't shake the feeling that her journey was far from over. While the immediate challenges had eased, she knew there was still so much more to be done. The question wasn't whether she could continue making a difference, it was how far her ripple effect would reach. And unbeknownst to her, the answer lay just around the corner, waiting to unfold in ways she could never have imagined. As winter gave way to spring, the transformation of Maggie's diner was undeniable. What had once been a struggling eatery on the brink of closure had become the beating heart of Maplewood, a place where people gathered not just for food, but for connection, support, and hope. The weekly community nights continued to draw crowds, and the diner buzzed with life every evening. Volunteers streamed in and out, eager to lend a hand, while families facing hardships found solace in knowing they wouldn't go hungry. Maggie, herself, was busier than ever, juggling her role as cook, hostess, counselor, and cheerleader. Yet despite the long hours and endless responsibilities, she felt more alive than she had in years. Her children, Emily and Jake, noticed the change, too. Where once their mother had seemed weighed down by worry, she now radiated energy and purpose. They joined her efforts wholeheartedly, helping serve meals, organize events, and welcome newcomers. For the first time in a long while, their family felt united, not just by blood, but by a shared mission to make a difference. One sunny afternoon, as Maggie wiped down tables after the lunch rush, Sarah walked in carrying a stack of newspapers. She placed them on the counter with a grin. "Your front page news again," she announced proudly. Maggie raised an eyebrow, curious but wary. "What now?" Sarah flipped open the paper to reveal a full-page feature titled, "Maplewood's Miracle Diner: How One Woman's Compassion Sparked a Movement." The article detailed how Maggie's simple act of feeding Daniel had ignited a chain reaction of kindness throughout the town. It highlighted stories of individuals whose lives had been transformed by her generosity, from Lisa and Tom, who were now stable enough to rent their own apartment, to Clara, whose free meal program in another town had grown into a thriving nonprofit. But what truly caught Maggie's attention was the final paragraph. "Thanks to Maggie Thompson, Maplewood has proven that even in our darkest times, communities can come together to create light. This is more than a story about one woman. It's a testament to the power of collective compassion." Tears welled up in Maggie's eyes as she read the words. For so long, she had seen herself as someone fighting alone against impossible odds. Now she realized she wasn't alone at all. Her small acts of kindness had inspired others to step up, creating a ripple effect that extended far beyond anything she could have imagined. Inspired by the article, donations continued pouring in from across the region. Some came in the form of money, while others arrived as crates of fresh produce, canned goods, or household supplies. Businesses offered discounts or free services, and local farmers donated eggs, milk, and vegetables. The diner became a hub of abundance, overflowing with resources that allowed Maggie to expand her outreach. With the growing influx of support, Maggie faced a decision. Should she use the funds to pay off her debts and secure her family's future? Or should she invest in something bigger, something that could benefit the entire community? After much thought, and with input from her children and trusted friends like Sarah, Maggie made a bold choice. She decided to launch a permanent initiative aimed at addressing the root causes of poverty and hardship in Maplewood. She called it the Maplewood Helping Hands Fund. The idea was simple yet ambitious: to provide emergency assistance, job training, childcare services, and educational workshops to anyone in need. To kickstart the project, Maggie partnered with local charities, schools, and businesses, pooling resources and expertise. She envisioned the fund operating out of a dedicated space adjacent to the diner, turning the area into a vibrant center of activity and support. News of Maggie's plan spread quickly, drawing widespread praise and enthusiasm. Volunteers rallied behind her vision, offering their skills and time to bring it to life. Construction crews worked tirelessly to renovate an old building next door, transforming it into a welcoming space filled with classrooms, offices, and a large communal kitchen. Painted in bright colors and adorned with murals created by local artists, the new center stood as a symbol of hope and resilience. On the day of its grand opening, the streets of Maplewood were packed with residents eager to celebrate. Balloons bobbed in the breeze and banners reading, "Together we thrive," hung above the entrance. Inside, the air buzzed with excitement as people explored the facility, marveling at its potential. Maggie stood at the podium, her voice trembling with emotion as she addressed the crowd. "This isn't my dream, it's ours," she said, gesturing to the sea of faces before her. "Every single person here has played a part in making this possible. Whether you volunteered your time, donated supplies, or simply showed up tonight, you've helped create something beautiful. Together, we're proving that no matter how tough things get, we can rise above it." Her speech earned thunderous applause, followed by cheers and tears. As the celebration continued, visitors toured the facility, signing up for classes, enrolling their children in after-school programs, and learning about available resources. By the end of the night, the center's registration forms were overflowing with names, each one representing a life poised for positive change. Among those attending the event was Harold Jenkins, a wealthy entrepreneur who had traveled from Chicago after reading about Maggie's work. Though he rarely ventured outside his corporate world, Harold had been deeply moved by the articles detailing Maggie's journey. Having grown up poor himself, he understood the struggles faced by many in Maplewood. He admired Maggie's determination and wanted to see firsthand how her efforts were impacting the community. Harold arrived quietly, blending into the crowd as he observed the festivities. When he finally approached Maggie, she was surprised but grateful for his presence. Over coffee and pie, they talked late into the evening, sharing stories and discussing ways to further strengthen the Helping Hands Fund. Harold listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and offering suggestions based on his business experience. By the time they parted ways, Harold had made a promise. He would return soon with concrete plans to support Maggie's vision. True to his word, he came back, within weeks accompanied by architects and financial advisors. Together, they outlined proposals for expanding the center's reach, including partnerships with national organizations and fundraising strategies to ensure long-term sustainability. Harold also revealed his personal commitment to the cause. "I've seen what happens when communities band together," he told Maggie during one of their meetings. "Your work here is proof that miracles are possible. I want to help you take it to the next level." With Harold's backing, the Helping Hands Fund flourished. New programs launched, focusing on everything from mental health counseling to entrepreneurship training. Job fairs brought employers to town, connecting residents with opportunities they might otherwise never have known existed. Childcare services enabled parents to pursue education or employment without worrying about their kids' safety. Slowly but surely, Maplewood began to transform, not just economically but socially and emotionally as well. For Maggie, watching these changes unfold filled her with immense pride. Her children thrived alongside her, inspired by her example. Emily graduated high school at the top of her class, earning a scholarship to study education. Jake discovered a passion for mechanics, landing an apprenticeship at a local garage. Both credited their mother's perseverance and selflessness for shaping their dreams. Despite the accolades and recognition, Maggie remained humble, always deflecting praise onto the community. "This isn't about me," she often said. "It's about us, all of us working together to lift each other up." And yet, deep down, she knew the truth. Her single act of kindness toward Daniel had set off a chain reaction that touched countless lives. From feeding one hungry man to sparking a movement that changed an entire town, Maggie proved that even the smallest gestures of compassion could lead to extraordinary outcomes. As spring turned to summer, the diner and the Helping Hand Center stood side by side, symbols of resilience and unity. People from neighboring towns visited, hoping to replicate Maplewood's success in their own communities. Journalists wrote follow-up stories, capturing the ongoing impact of Maggie's work. And through it all, Maggie kept serving meals, listening to stories, and reminding everyone who walked through her doors that miracles truly do begin with love. But little did she know, the best was yet to come. A surprise awaited her, one that would take her journey to heights she could never have dreamed of. The momentum sparked by Maggie's efforts continued to grow, drawing attention not just locally but across the country. By late summer, Maplewood had become a symbol of hope, a shining example of what could happen when compassion and community came together. The Helping Hand Center thrived, offering programs that addressed everything from job training to mental health support. Families who once struggled to put food on the table now found themselves gaining stability, thanks to Maggie's vision and the collective efforts of the town. Word of Maplewood's transformation reached national media outlets, capturing the interest of journalists eager to highlight stories of resilience in challenging times. One such journalist was Rachel Bennett, a correspondent for a popular morning news show. After reading Sarah's articles and hearing testimonials from people whose lives had been changed, Rachel decided to visit Maplewood herself. She arrived unannounced one crisp September morning, camera crew in tow, ready to document the story behind the headlines. When Rachel stepped into Maggie's diner, she immediately felt its warmth, the kind that couldn't be faked or manufactured. The walls were adorned with photos of smiling families, thank you notes scrawled on napkins, and colorful drawings made by children during after-school art classes. The air smelled of freshly baked pie, and laughter echoed through the space as volunteers bustled about, preparing for another busy day. Maggie greeted Rachel warmly, unaware of her identity at first. It wasn't until Rachel introduced herself and explained her purpose that Maggie realized the magnitude of what was happening. "We're here to tell your story," Rachel said, her eyes shining with admiration. "What you've done is extraordinary, not just for this town, but for anyone who hears about it." At first, Maggie hesitated. She had grown accustomed to local coverage but hadn't anticipated being featured on a national platform. Still, she agreed to participate, trusting Rachel's sincerity and hoping to inspire others facing similar struggles. Over the next few days, cameras followed Maggie everywhere, from serving breakfast at the diner to leading workshops at the Helping Hand Center. Interviews with residents painted a vivid picture of how her actions had transformed lives. One particularly moving segment featured Daniel, the man whose hunger had sparked the chain reaction months earlier. Now employed full-time at a construction company, he spoke emotionally about how Maggie's kindness had saved him when he had nowhere else to turn. "She didn't just give me a meal," he said, tears streaming down his face. "She gave me hope. And because of her, I'm standing here today, able to provide for myself and help others." Another interview showcased Lisa and Tom, the young couple who had lost everything in a house fire. They described how the community rallied around them, providing not just meals but furniture, clothing, and encouragement. Their 2 children sat beside them, grinning as they talked about their favorite dishes at the diner. "Maggie isn't just feeding us, she's teaching us how to believe again," Lisa said, her voice steady with gratitude. By the time filming wrapped up, Maggie felt both humbled and overwhelmed. She had always known her work mattered, but seeing it reflected back through the eyes of others brought a new level of clarity. Her small act of kindness toward Daniel had grown into something far greater than she ever imagined. A movement rooted in love and unity. A few weeks later, the episode aired on national television titled From Rock Bottom to Miracles: How a Small-Town Diner Owner Changed Lives. Viewers tuned in from coast to coast, captivated by Maggie's journey and the ripple effect of her generosity. Social media exploded with reactions, hashtags like Margaret's Maplewood Miracle trending within hours. Messages poured in from strangers sharing their own stories of hardship and expressing gratitude for Maggie's reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is light. Donations flooded into the Helping Hands Fund, enabling Maggie to expand services even further. New partnerships emerged, connecting Maplewood with organizations dedicated to combating poverty and fostering education. Schools invited Maggie to speak at assemblies, inspiring students to think beyond themselves and consider how they could make a difference in their own communities. But perhaps the most unexpected outcome came in the form of a phone call. One evening, as Maggie closed up the diner, her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Hesitant but curious, she answered. On the other end was none other than Harold Jenkins, the entrepreneur who had already played a pivotal role in supporting her vision. "Maggie," Harold began, his tone brimming with excitement, "I have some incredible news. Your story has caught the attention of someone very influential, a philanthropist named Evelyn Carter. She wants to meet you." Evelyn Carter was a household name, known for her charitable foundation's work in addressing global issues like hunger, homelessness, and access to education. Her wealth rivaled that of tech moguls and business tycoons, but what set her apart was her hands-on approach to giving back. Evelyn believed in empowering grassroots movements, investing in projects led by individuals who understood the needs of their communities firsthand. Curious yet cautious, Maggie agreed to meet Evelyn. 2 weeks later, she traveled to Chicago, where Evelyn hosted a private luncheon at her estate. Surrounded by lush gardens and breathtaking architecture, Maggie felt out of place among the opulence. But Evelyn quickly put her at ease, greeting her with a warm hug and genuine interest in her story. Over lunch, they discussed Maggie's journey, the challenges she faced, and her dreams for the future. Evelyn listened intently, nodding as Maggie described her plans to expand the Helping Hands Center and create sustainable solutions for Maplewood's residents. When Maggie finished speaking, Evelyn leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "I want to help you take this to the next level," Evelyn said firmly. "Your work is exactly the kind of initiative my foundation seeks to support. We'll provide funding, resources, and expertise to ensure your programs continue thriving and growing." Maggie's heart raced as Evelyn outlined her proposal. In addition to financial backing, Evelyn offered to connect Maggie with experts in fields ranging from urban development to healthcare. Together, they would transform the Helping Hands Center into a model program that could be replicated nationwide, bringing hope and opportunity to countless communities. By the time the meeting ended, Maggie was speechless. Never in her wildest dreams had she envisioned reaching this point. From the brink of eviction to becoming a catalyst for nationwide change, her journey was nothing short of miraculous. Back in Maplewood, excitement rippled through the town as news of Evelyn's involvement spread. Residents gathered at the diner to celebrate, raising glasses of lemonade and cheering Maggie's name. For many, this latest development felt like validation of everything they had worked so hard to achieve. They weren't just rebuilding their own lives. They were proving that small towns could lead the way in creating meaningful change. With Evelyn's support, ambitious plans began taking shape. Architects designed blueprints for a state-of-the-art facility that would replace the current Helping Hands Center, complete with classrooms, medical offices, a library, and a community garden. Local leaders collaborated with national organizations to develop innovative programs focused on workforce development, affordable housing, and mental health advocacy. Volunteers doubled their efforts, knowing their contributions would soon benefit not only Maplewood but potentially thousands of other towns. Through it all, Maggie remained steadfast in her commitment to staying grounded. Despite the accolades, and opportunities pouring in, she refused to let success distract her from the core mission, helping those in need. Every decision she made was guided by a simple question: will this bring more light into someone's life? As autumn settled over Maplewood, painting the trees in vibrant shades of red and gold, Maggie reflected on how far she had come. What started as a desperate attempt to keep her family afloat had blossomed into a movement that touched lives across the nation. Yet, even as she looked ahead to the possibilities unfolding before her, she never forgot the lessons learned along the way, that miracles truly do begin with love, and that no act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted. Little did Maggie know, however, that one final twist awaited her, a moment that would cement her legacy and leave an indelible mark on history. As winter approached, Maplewood was alive with anticipation. The new Helping Hand Center was nearing completion, and the town buzzed with excitement about what it would mean for their future. Construction workers put the finishing touches on the state-of-the-art facility, while volunteers prepared classrooms, stocked shelves, and arranged furniture. The building stood as a testament to resilience, a beacon of hope rising from the ashes of hardship. Maggie spent her days overseeing the final stages of the project, ensuring every detail reflected her vision. She walked through the halls, imagining the lives that would be transformed within those walls. Medical offices would provide free checkups and counseling services. Classrooms would host job training workshops and educational programs. A community garden in the backyard would supply fresh produce year-round, teaching sustainable farming practices to anyone interested. It was more than just a building. It was a promise to the people of Maplewood that they were valued, supported, and capable of achieving greatness. One chilly November morning, Maggie arrived at the diner early, as she always did. The sun had barely risen, casting a soft golden glow over the frost-covered streets. As she unlocked the door and flipped on the lights, she noticed an envelope taped to the glass. Curious, she peeled it off and opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. "Maggie, you've done so much for this town. Today, let us do something for you. Meet us at the park at noon." Maggie frowned, puzzled but intrigued. Who could have sent this, and what did it mean? She tucked the note into her apron pocket and went about her routine, serving breakfast to the regulars who trickled in throughout the morning. By the time noon rolled around, her curiosity got the better of her. Leaving the diner in Sarah's capable hands, Maggie bundled up and headed to the park. When she arrived, she gasped in astonishment. Hundreds of people filled the space: residents of Maplewood, volunteers, friends, and even strangers who had traveled from neighboring towns. They carried signs bearing messages like, "Thank you, Maggie," and "You changed our lives." Children ran around waving balloons, while musicians played cheerful tunes on guitars and violins. At the center of it all stood Harold Jenkins and Evelyn Carter, smiling warmly. Harold stepped forward, holding a microphone. "Maggie," he began, his voice carrying across the crowd, "you've given so much to this community. Your time, your energy, your heart. Today, we're here to give something back." Evelyn took the microphone next, her eyes glistening with emotion. "Maggie, your kindness has inspired not only us but countless others across the country. Because of you, we've seen what's possible when compassion meets action. That's why we've come together to honor your legacy in a special way." She gestured toward a large banner draped across the gazebo. Written in bold letters were the words, "The Maggie Thompson Foundation." Maggie's knees nearly buckled as the realization hit her. Her name, her story, was now immortalized in a foundation dedicated to spreading the same values she had lived by: kindness, unity, and empowerment. Funded by Evelyn's organization and supported by donors nationwide, the foundation would replicate Maggie's model in towns and cities everywhere, offering resources and guidance to communities striving to overcome adversity. Tears streamed down Maggie's face as the crowd erupted in applause. For so long, she had believed she was fighting alone, struggling to keep her family and her diner afloat. Now, standing amidst hundreds of cheering faces, she understood the true power of connection. Every meal she had served, Every kind word she had spoken had planted seeds that grew into something far greater than she ever dreamed. In the weeks that followed, the Maggie Thompson Foundation officially launched, quickly gaining momentum. Representatives traveled across the country, sharing Maggie's story and helping communities establish their own versions of the Helping Hearts centers. From rural villages to urban neighborhoods, the Foundation's impact rippled outward, touching lives in ways Maggie could scarcely comprehend. Back in Maplewood, life continued to flourish. The new center opened its doors to overwhelming demand, becoming a hub of activity and support. Families attended classes, seniors participated in wellness programs, and young adults found pathways to employment. Even the diner remained a cornerstone of the community, bustling with customers eager to share meals and conversations. Maggie's children, Emily and Jake, thrived alongside her. Emily graduated college and returned to Maplewood to teach at the IWR local elementary school, where she instilled in her students the importance of empathy and perseverance. Jake opened his own auto repair shop, hiring apprentices from the job training program and mentoring them with the same patience and care Maggie had shown him. As years passed, Maggie's story became legend, not just in Maplewood but around the world. Schools included her journey in their curriculums, teaching students about the transformative power of kindness. Books were written, documentaries filmed, and awards bestowed upon her. Yet, despite the fame, Maggie remained unchanged. She still greeted customers at the diner with her trademark smile, still cooked pies from scratch, and still listened intently to anyone who needed a sympathetic ear. One crisp December evening, as snow blanketed the town in Christmas lights, twinkled in the windows, Maggie sat at a booth in her diner, sipping hot cocoa. Across from her sat Sarah, who had become not just a journalist, but a dear friend. Together they reminisced about how far they'd come since that fateful day 5 years ago, when Maggie had faced eviction. "You know," Sarah said thoughtfully, "when I first met you, I saw someone struggling to hold on. But I also saw strength, a quiet determination that refused to give up. I don't think I realized then just how much that strength would change the world." Maggie chuckled softly, shaking her head. "It wasn't me, Sarah. It was all of us. Every person who walked through these doors, every volunteer who lent a hand, every donor who gave what they could. They're the ones who made this happen. I was just the spark." Sarah smiled, knowing Maggie would always downplay her role. But deep down, she understood the truth. Maggie had been the catalyst, the one who dared to believe in miracles when hope seemed lost. Her single act of feeding Daniel had ignited a chain reaction that touched thousands of lives. As they sat there, surrounded by laughter and chatter, Maggie glanced out the window. Snowflakes danced in the air, reflecting the warm glow of streetlights. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel the weight of everything she had accomplished. Not with pride, but with gratitude. Gratitude for the struggles that had shaped her, for the community that had rallied behind her, and for the simple yet profound power of kindness. And so, Maggie's legacy endured, not as a tale of one woman's triumph, but as a reminder that, even in our darkest moments, we are never truly alone. When we choose to lift each other up, to extend a hand or share a meal, we create ripples that stretch farther than we can see. Miracles, after all, begin with love. And Maggie Thompson had proven that love could move mountains. The diner hummed with life as another day came to an end. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing Maplewood in quiet beauty. Inside, warmth radiated from every corner, filling hearts with hope and homes with light. And though the seasons would change and years would pass, one thing remained, certain. Maggie's story would forever inspire generations to come, to dream big, to act boldly, and to believe in the extraordinary power of compassion,